Good morning.
Morning, Michael. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing okay. See, it feels like just the end of a cold. Still a little congested, but not too bad. Lizzie got it a lot worse. Lizzie had the fever, fatigue. She's on the Paxil,
Ovid, yeah.
and let's see, she started feeling sick on Wednesday. So yeah, it's still pretty. I mean, she's functioning now, but yeah, it was kind of scary. So, oh god, I just got a I just got a text right now from Judy Falzon that her daughter texted. I mean, is positive for COVID. It's like everybody's getting it, and thank God we have this vaccine. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
And they've got the other meds for it. All right, so let's see. I hope the others will join us because we're almost done. We're almost at the end. Let's see. Where am I looking for? I want to pull up the
Now,
text.
you were planning to do the rest of it in one session?
Yeah, because actually, I think I forgot to send out the Friday notes because I was dealing with a lot
Yeah.
of things. Yeah, so the Friday notes I went actually into. What am I looking for here? I actually went into 30A.
Oh, well, we didn't.
Yeah, okay. So we can do that today too. And
Because the thing seems to have almost half of 32 as well.
no, oh, let me go. I thought it was
I
30.
mean, 31 is the last complete one, but it's more than just a tiny part of the page of 32.
Uh-oh. I think I misjudged then. I thought it was 30. Let's see. 31A. No, no, it should be. No, 31A is the last page.
Uh,
Oh, wait a
30,
minute. No, no, you're right. You're right. You're right. Oh, 31, 30. Oh, gosh. Okay. How did I miss that? All right. 30. Oh, gosh. All right. So how are we going to do this? Well, maybe we won't do it that way. Maybe we will finish. We'll do 31. Let's see. Oh, I think I scheduled it for. All right, well, let's think that out for a moment.
okay.
Let's do this. Let's see. So I had planned. No, the intro.
We wanted to finish on the 7th, I think, or whatever.
Yeah. So let's see. Right, that was the goal. I was going to finish it after. Let's see. So today is okay. Here's the 29th. All right. So then next Sunday. Oh, we can't do it because Shavuot, right? So we're going to do it on. Oh, yes, I see what I did wrong here. Okay. So, yeah, so the 7th, what I think we should do, the 7th is we should then do 31. We'll go through 31, or at least 30 through maybe the middle of 31. And then, let's see, is the next Sunday possible? Wait, what did I just do here? Wait, not list. Hold on here. Okay, here we are back again. All right. 30. Okay, so the 7th, if we could, if for those who can do it on the 7th at 7, we'll do next
Right.
page. And then the next week, oh gosh, I have another unveiling at 11 o'clock. That's a problem. So I guess,
Yeah, we don't have a problem that day. I mean, we
okay,
don't have anything on the calendar that
okay.
day.
So maybe what we'll do, let's see, when's the bar? Oh gosh. All right. I'm just trying to think when the best time. So I can't move the unveiling. We could do it in the afternoon. I was kind of hoping to do it to get, in person. Um, so maybe, because then we could actually, well, of course, no, with everybody getting COVID, I don't know if everybody wants to be in the same room. Um, all right. I guess we could, I guess if we can do it at 1 o'clock on June 12th.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I mean, last Sunday we had a book group at another synagogue, at a synagogue in California that
Okay.
overlapped
So we're
your
gonna
class.
do, yeah, we're gonna do one, okay. Final class for Megillah. All right. So we're gonna do this. And all right, if people are interested and it's possible, maybe we'll do it in person. If not, we'll just do it online, just like we did with Tanit. I thought, where are you? Here we go. Yeah, because I thought that then the 7th, I was thinking, oh, if we did it in the evening at the synagogue, we could we can still invite people, but I thought it would be a good finishing up after Shavuot. But I think that might still be a little iffy because
Yeah.
I don't know what the story is. Like if okay, because
So are you requiring boosters as well as vaccines or?
oh yeah, no, people have had to be boosted with their vaccines, but now it's so ironic. We were thinking of changing it just last week to allow people who are unvaccinated now to come into the synagogue because it's been so long. People who are vaccinated are vaccinated. Just about everybody in our congregation is vaccinated. Who's not vaccinated are one or a couple of the teenage girls because their parents are worried, even though the parents are vaccinated, and one or two individuals who haven't, been fighting the vaccination thing from the beginning. So that's about it. The problem we're finding now is we can't get vendors into the building because all the people who do your work, the HVAC people, we need to hire a custodial team right now because Kay, our custodian, is out for a number of months healing
Now,
from.
what's the story with Kay?
She had kidney stones,
Oh,
and they were very and let it go. Unfortunately, I don't even know if she was aware of it until it got really serious. Had the operation. Um, uh, we don't, our synagogue doesn't offer health insurance
right.
for the few employees we have. So she didn't take insurance. So then she had to fight with the hospital. She and Tom had to fight with the hospital about allowing her to, because the operation, they needed another operation. And they couldn't, it was terrible. I mean, they were giving her a runaround because she didn't have insurance. They wouldn't give her the operation. So finally she got that operation. And she now does have health insurance and she's healing. I mean, but this was a really serious thing. So
Right.
we're talking like she probably, God willing, she comes back, but probably not until August. So we have to find somebody to replace her.
Yeah.
And the cleaning teams that'll come in and just clean everything in one day, they're all unvaccinated. So now we're finding that according to our policy, we can't hire anybody. So they were going to change it. And even the doctors agreed that at this point, the people who are vaccinated and boosted are done. The people who are not, the few people who refuse, they're not going to be vaccinated. It's a little trickier if parents don't want to vaccinate their kids because they're afraid it'll hurt them. It's a little different because now your response, are we going to tell people you can't educate your kids Jewishly? I mean, it's different.
Yeah.
So, and it's not the kids don't get to choose to get vaccinated. So, so they were going to relent. And then we had the first communal luncheon in 3 years.
Yeah.
And 4 of us got COVID right afterwards. We assume somebody brought it in, but we're not sure.
That seems likely it's one of the 4 that already had it.
Or someone asymptomatic could have.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, because you're taking your mask off, you're sitting around with people, and now people are like, okay, shut down the synagogue for 2 weeks. It's like, wait a minute ago, you were going to have unvaccinated people come in. Now we're shutting down the synagogue, and I just feel like every time, because now it's an endemic, it's not pandemic, it's endemic. And every time we open up the synagogue, if we're allowing people to take off their masks, which of course, if you have a meal, you have to, it's possible somebody after that meal is going to say, oh, I got COVID this week. Oh,
Right.
well, you have to live with it. And as I said, thank God people are vaccinated. Thank God they do have these treatments. Lizzie's on Paxlovid or
I think it's Paxlovid.
Paxlovid, is that what it is? Whatever
it's the Pfizer.
Yeah. Helped her a lot. I mean, she was really, really sick. Only now she's telling me how really sick she was Friday when she started getting bad, but she started on that drug and it's helped. So, you have that. And obviously if it's really bad, people are going to the hospital, they have treatments there. So it's not like it was a year ago. And we just people have to be smart. I mean, if people feel like I cannot come to the synagogue, I wish we had if we had money, it would be great if we could get what, I don't know if Temple has this, but a lot of synagogues now in churches they can do simultaneous.
Temple's doing that, but it's mostly still been Zoom only. It's supposed to go back to the in-person hybrid regularly, I think starting June 10th.
Okay.
Companies has been in Australia for a month, so but we'll see, because I mean she tends to panic about it.
She's very anxious, but
limit on the number of people, and you have to have shown that you're vaccinated and boosted. This past week, the Temple Book Group had its first hybrid meeting. We're now set up in the lounge so you can do hybrid.
So when you say hybrid, do you have a camera?
Yeah, some people are in person and some are on Zoom. And that in fact was led by Robbie Grimstad. The Grimstads now live in
Seattle or something,
West Coast. So I think there were 8 of us there, and there was at least one other person, maybe a couple of others who Zoomed besides Robbie. But the services, they have people on Zoom.
Right. But I just want to know how, so can you're sitting in the library, can you see
the lounge, but anyway.
Or the lounge, right? But can you see Robbie and all the people on Zoom on a big screen?
Yes. Well, it's a large TV, but anyway, or that kind of screen.
Got it.
Yeah. And in the main sanctuary, there's, I guess, 2 screens up at the front, one facing the congregation and one sort of sideways. So if you're at the Bema, you can turn and talk to the people on Zoom. I find it a little distracting when we're there, the service leaders talking to
the screen,
to a screen. And also, if I'm not sitting really close, I can't read names and I don't, and the pictures, but you can see everything. I've also seen things like, we've streamed a lot of Central Synagogue services, and they have the capability of bringing people in on Zoom on a screen that's emphasized by the up front, which they do on occasion, but it's not that the whole world can be on at least actively on Zoom where you can see them. I don't know what members can do. Maybe they can be in a more webinar-like situation, but where they wouldn't be visible. So just the people they want you to see.
Interesting. Because we were at a church where they were for a concert, and the church had it, so they had 2 permanent screens on the side of their bin, or whatever they call it, the front of the church. So I've seen that, and at Temple, is it a temporary screen? Like they just
Well, I mean, we hired someone who set up the tech, and I think the idea is this will be permanent. I mean,
Yeah.
We
But
have
it's
people who
not-
live at a distance.
It's not permanently mounted, though.
No, it's on a card or something.
Oh, got it.
I don't know. Don't have a setup in the chapel. When I raised the issue of, could we have services in the chapel, set it up,
Oh,
there were people worried about how you can't socially distance.
oh,
And we went a week ago. Jay was in town. It was yard site for my mother.
Mhm.
And maybe there were 35 or 40 people, which is huge for in person these days.
yeah.
But everyone, within main sanctuary, everyone crowds together.
Oh,
Well, everyone wants to
Or
be up front.
wants to be
because
up
you
front.
can't see
oh,
very well when you're.
But I mean, we've been there when it's been like 12 or 14 people. And I mean, Morley Feinstein used to say that main sanctuary sleeps 300.
yeah.
And maybe after some remodeling, it's not quite that large, but 12 people, it feels so lost. And
Yeah.
So most people weren't masked. We masked.
Wow.
So, and we masked for the book group, but among other things, we're planning to meet our other son and his family in Europe in late June.
Okay.
So
No,
they were hoping the younger one could have at least one vaccine, but still hasn't been authorized.
oh,
I don't know. The older one, I guess, is now eligible for a booster. That's just happened. I don't know if he's had it, but they haven't authorized for under 5 yet. And I think they leave on the 15th or 16th. But yeah, it's started with the idea of meeting them in Paris for Chuck's 80th birthday.
Oh, very nice.
We'll meet them for a few days in Berlin ahead of time. Our daughter-in-law is doing research at major museums.
Then I'll celebrate my birthday by flying from Berlin to Paris.
Oh, wow.
So-
Very exciting.
So, and then we'll go to Brussels with them. And this all happened so late, we didn't think hard about, is there someplace else we want to go?
Oh, well, I hope that you're able to go. That sounds great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's looking like it, I think. Yeah, I mean, Stephanie, has this, she's professor of ancient art history at SMU and has a nice fund for funding research, bringing in scholars.
Wow.
And for several years, bringing in scholars hasn't been possible. So you use it yourself.
That's great. That's terrific. All right. Well, let's go. Let's start. And
But we want to stay healthy until then.
good idea. That's a good idea. All right. So, well, maybe that's the answer. So then we'll finish up on the 12th. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for pointing that out to me. I don't know why I thought.
Oh, that's okay. I was just thumbing through the book yesterday and trying to see.
Maybe I was just thinking about, because Tom Need, I know, ended up on like 30 or 31, but
Yeah, it ended up with a very, tiny bit of the next page. This is more than just a tiny bit. So, and chapters sometimes have ended at a tiny bit of the next page.
Yeah. All right. Well, all right. So let's start. Maybe we'll just, in that case, we'll just go to 30. Well, let's see how far we got. This I gotta find the lessons here. All right. So we left off at the bottom of 28B. It's just getting into 29A, and it says,
just one question before. Would you like me to send you? We've joined this congregation in Los Gatos, in the Bay Area, and I can send you, if you want, a copy of the statement they always put in about how to attend services and whether you're vaccinated or not.
Oh, sure.
Now, they have the Santa Clara County Health Department policies to help them, and I don't know what kind of checking they do on things.
Takes a more active role than you'll find in Indiana.
Yeah, because we're asking now if you've been with a person who has COVID, please, don't come to Shoal that week. Just, be thoughtful.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
All
don't
right.
they have something about that, but they have something about who has to wear masks and encouraging masks. And so I can send
Okay,
you a
that'd be great.
copy. Because it comes in their weekly emails
Okay.
about what's going on that week.
All right. So anyway, here's the we've got a bright right in the yeah. Tanu Rabbanan. Mivatlin Talmud Torah lehotza'at hamed ulachsat kala. So as we know that the hierarchy, the rabbinical hierarchy, is Torah study is the very top. That's top value. But there are exceptions, and there are times when other things become primary. So in this case, one does interrupt the Torah study to carry out the dead for burial, so assisting with burial, and escorting a bride to her wedding. They said about Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Eli, that he would interrupt his Torah study to carry out the dead for burial and to escort a bride at her wedding. So there's a confirmation. So wait a minute. In what case is this statement said? Only when there aren't sufficient numbers of other people available to perform the mitzvah. However, if there are sufficient numbers, you don't have to interrupt your Torah study. So we're really talking about a case where there's nobody else to assist in burial and there's nobody else to assist the bride. So now, of course, a good question. Well, what does that mean, sufficient? So this is great because it now seems to just undermine exactly what they just said. What the Kama Kol Tzarko Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Inya Mishmei Rav Tresar Alfe Gavre Veshita Alfe Shipure. Okay, 12,000 men and 6,000 men to blow horns is a sign of mourning. Okay, so that's a pretty big number. Maybe a few of those famous Ravs in Israel, they get more than 12,000 or those funerals.
Yeah.
Yeah, those super spreader events. So that maybe in those cases, but so pretty much what the response of the Gemara is that, yeah, you'd always have to go to the funeral or stop your Torah study. Some say in a different version, 12,000 people among whom are 6,000 people who are blowing horns of mourning. And Ula said, so yeah, a different response, with how many is sufficient? Enough to make a procession of people all the way from the town gate to the place of burial. What do they say here for that? Oh, okay. That's from the place of mourning to the grave. So that obviously you don't need 12,000 people, most likely in that case. Just, but still a lot of people.
It still might clear out the Torah study.
Yeah. Rav Sheshet said, "K'nitinata kach netilata." As the Torah was given, so should it be taken away. So just as the Torah was given in the presence of 600,000 men, so too, plus others, obviously, so too, when a person dies, you should have that many people, that's the appropriate number of people who should be assisting in the mourning process, the grieving process. And then okay, so who's he talking about? The Gemara says it applies to someone who's read the Bible and studied halakha, but for someone who's taught others, there's no limit to the honor that should be shown. Right, let me just get a call.
So last night when I was reading this, I was wishing I had read it earlier in the week when I was preparing to lead a Torah study on the Midbar for Shir Hadash. They use the Israeli Torah reading calendar. They were on the Midbar yesterday, and we've got the 603,000 some odd.
Yeah. Wait, let me just get a.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. All right. So, Next section. So Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Bar Yochai, Omer, Bo ur'ei kama chavivin Yisrael lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shebechol makom shegalu shchina imahen. This is a very famous teaching, that how beloved the Jewish people are before God. Wherever we are exiled, God goes with us. And the proof, they were exiled to Egypt, and the divine presence went with them. For it says in the book of Samuel, I reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt. Wait, did I reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt? They were exiled to Babylonia, and the divine presence went with them. For your sake I was sent to Babylonia. So too, when in the future they will be redeemed, the divine presence will be with them. As it is stated, then the Lord your God will return with your captivity. Where is the verse here? V'shav Adonai Elohecha et shvutecha. It doesn't say v'heshiv, which is the causative. He will return you, he will cause you to return, but rather shav, as if God is part of the return. God will return God's self with the other exiles. So what's the connection here? I think it's simply, I think maybe because we're talking about Torah study and accompanying Torah, or a person of Torah, a man of Torah, that's a scholar of Torah, in his final resting place. So here God also accompanies the people when they're in exile. Bivavel Hecha. This was very interesting. Well, I would say, where does God reside? Where is the divine presence in Bavel? And Abaye said, B'vei kanisa de Hutzal, u'vei kanisa de Shaf. The Shaf was the other. Oh no. Kanisa de Shaf v'yatev b'nehar da'ah. So he's in two places. He is in Hutzal and he's in Nahar Da'ah. If you were in another synagogue, I think you'd be insulted in Babylonia, but that's where God's presence shows up. Kind of interesting. It's almost like saying in Israel, the land of Israel, God's always there, but in Babylonia, just a few places. And do not say do not say that the divine presence resided here and there, both places. Rather, at times God was in Hutzal and times in Nahar Da'ah. So this is a really interesting statement, because Abaye seems to suggest that God's presence is almost a physical being. When we call God the kavod of God, it's often translated the presence of the divine, but kavod comes from the word heavy, meaning there's substance to it. So there's a sense, and obviously this was a debate among scholars in the medieval period. There's a famous debate between Maimonides and another rabbi of the time, where Maimonides was big on God is incorporeal. And this other rabbi was like, who's Maimonides to tell these holy people who believe that God actually has a physical presentation, that they're not good Jews if they believe that God has some physical presence.
The ancient Near East, the belief in sort of physical presence of gods was very prevalent. You had the statue of the god, and Mesopotamians took elaborate meals into these statues in some of the temples.
Oh, of course. But even in the medieval period, you have people who you would assume, we throughout the scripture, there are places where it talks about God not being able to be seen, and God, no person can see God and live. And
but you also have, have God saying to Aaron, God saying face to face to Aaron, Moses is the only one I talked to face to face.
Right. So there's so you'd think, oh, well, this is the belief that, God isn't corporeal, but Abai, by saying, see, it'd be one thing if he said the presence is in two places. All right, so God has this ascendant presence. God can be everywhere at the same time. By suggesting, right, by suggesting that God is only in one synagogue at one time is saying that there is a physicality to that divine presence that can't be in two places at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Anyway, Abai said, so I'm just pointing out because we automatically assume, oh, God, Jews believe that God has no physical presence. God is incorporeal. Well,
that's a considerably later belief, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't realize it was later than the Talmud until I read this.
Right, exactly, yeah. So Abai says, I have a blessing coming to me for whenever I am within a distance of a parasang, I forgot a parasang is a certain number of miles, from one of those synagogues, I go in and pray there due to the special honor and sanctity attached to them. And it was related that the father of Shmuel and Levi were once sitting in the synagogue that was destroyed and built and rebuilt in Nehardea. The divine presence came and they heard a loud sound, so they rose and left. I thought that was really weird. He didn't have any
I didn't
notes on here, and I just thought that I thought that was interesting only because is that saying that they were scared to be in the same place?
Probably.
Well, that at least fits with a lot of other
that fits with what comes next, the Rav Sheshet.
So Rav Sheshet was Rav Sheshet was a tough guy. Rav Sheshet was blind, and he was once it's because it comes up in the story. Was once sitting in the synagogue that was destroyed and rebuilt in Nehardea, and the divine presence came, but he didn't leave. The ministering angels came and were frightening him in order to force him to leave. Rav Sheshet turned to God and said before him, Master of the universe, Ribono Shel Olam, aluv v'sheino aluv, mi nidchem mipnei mi. A person who is, he translates here as wretched, a person who's wretched and one who is not wretched, who should defer to whom? Shouldn't the one who is not wretched give way to the one who is, right? It's like you get on the bus and they always ask, please give your seat to a person who needs it, Now I am blind and wretched. Why then do you expect me to defer to the angels? And God then turned to the angels and said, leave them. Okay.
But I was just to go back for a bit on this sort of philosophical positions, perhaps, on whether the divine presence can be in only one place at a time. If you agree with Abai, then can the divine presence at that time be in Israel?
Right. Yeah. That's what's so it's a great question. Also, how did he know when? He said he always went to one of those two synagogues. How do you know if God was in which one God was in? So anyway, yes.
I think that's just you take a chance. Here's the opportunity.
So that's an interesting question, only because the polemics between the Babylonian and the Palestinian communities is Abai, who's Babylonian, suggesting that right now God is in one of our two possible places in our country, our area, because we're the greater Jewish community, or is it a polemic against the Babylonians by whoever put this in here, suggesting that there's only a couple of places in Babylonia, whereas in Israel, of course, the divine presence is always there. Or, well, actually, wait, in the context that we just read, I would argue that this is a Babylonian polemic.
Yes.
They were exiled to Babylonian, and the divine presence went with them. And here's where God went. God hangs out in two synagogues in Babylonia until the end of the exile.
Yeah.
So, Palestinians, you think God we've got God right now. God's with us because God's in exile with us. Yeah, that's my guess what the connection between this passage and the one right before it.
That sounds plausible to me.
Yeah. So yeah, it's as I always say that when you say Judaism says X about anything, that's always a false statement, because Judaism doesn't say anything about anything. It says a lot of things about things. So we have lots of ideas about how God's presence exists all over, in one place and everywhere. Okay. All right, so this is the Vahi Lahem Lemigdash Me'at. I have been to them as a little sanctuary in the countries where they have come. Rabbi Yitzchak said this is referring to the synagogues and study halls in Babylonia. And Rabbi Elazar said this is referring to the house of our master Rav in Babylonia.
So that's interesting. I mean, that's taking part of a verse from Ezekiel and neglecting the fact that it starts with God saying, I removed them from the nations and I have scattered them in the lands.
Right, yeah.
So and I think that's clearly supposed to be all over and not just Babylonia.
Exactly. So, okay, Darash Rava, Ma'idechtiv, Aranai Ma'on Ata Hayita Lanu. You've been our dwelling place in all generations. Okay, this is referring to synagogues and study halls. So this is a little bit, broadening it. Here, he's not saying, Rav at least isn't indicating that we're talking about Babylonian synagogues, but really, God is in a place, a holy place. We bring God into these places, synagogues where we pray and study halls where we study Torah. Abai said, initially I used to study Torah in my home and pray in the synagogue. Then once I heard it and understood that what King David said, Ahavti ma'on beitecha, Adonai ahavti ma'on beitecha, I would always study Torah in the synagogue to express my love for the place in which the divine presence resides. So the importance of the synagogue as a place of prayer and Torah study. Tanya, okay, Baraita, Rabbi Elazar HaKafar Omer, Atidin batei knisiot uvatei midrashot beBavel sheikavu be'Eretz Yisrael. Here's the other side of the polemic. In the future, says Rabbi Elazar HaKafar, the synagogues and the study halls in Babylonia will be transported and reestablished in Eretz Yisrael. Surely like Tavor among the mountains, like Carmel by the sea, so shall he come. So this is that midrash that, when God was going to give the Torah, all the mountains in the world wanted him to give it on their mountain. And so they all came to the land of Israel. And God allows Sinai, because it's the smallest of the mountains, very modest. And so based on that midrash, just as Tavor and Carmel, which came only momentarily to study Torah, were relocated and established in Eretz Yisrael, all the more so should the synagogues and study halls in Babylonia in which the Torah is read and disseminated be relocated to Eretz Yisrael. So
I really like these mountains.
Yeah.
Moving.
Yeah.
I mean, the image here is really good.
Yeah.
New phenomenon of coming.
And also notice that so don't think that Babylonia, okay, fine, you've got better scholars today, but you know what? Eventually you're all coming to the land of Israel. So we're still the center. Bar Kapara interpreted a verse homiletically. What is the meaning of that which is written? Lama tiratz dun harim gavnunim. Why do you look askance, tiratz dun, O high peak mountains, at the mountain that God has desired for his abode? A divine voice issued forth and said to all the mountains that came and demanded that the Torah be given to them, why do you seek to enter into a legal dispute with Mount Sinai? You are all blemished in comparison to Mount Sinai, as it is written, the Gavnunim, your Gavnunim. Lama Tiratdun Harim Gavnunim. So Gavnun can be high peaked, tall, right? Uchtiv Hatam O Gibein Odak. But when you're talking about disqualified priest, Gibein is somebody who has a crooked back, hunchback. So Gibein also signifies a blemish. Amar Rav Ashi Shmamina Hai Mandi Yahir Baal Mumhu. Great little ethical lesson. Rav Ashi says one who is arrogant, high, thinks of themselves highly, is in fact blemished. Okay. Keep going. Now we're back in the Mishnah. Mishnah teaches that even if a synagogue fell into ruin, it may not be made into a kapandaria, a shortcut. So, Rava says it's a shortcut. My kishma, and then he does a little explanation here. He brings a Hebrew explanation, etymological explanation to a Greek word. I think it's Greek. Latin.
Or why not?
Latin. Okay. It is like one who said, instead of going around the entire row of houses, makifna adari, to get to the other side, I will enter this house and walk through it to the other side. So the word kapandaria is a contraction of, well, actually it's Aramaic, I guess, makifna adari. And this is what he meant. It's implied by its name. Okay? Rabbi Abahu said, Im hayashvil meikara mutar. But if there had been a public path initially that passed through that location before the synagogue was built, it is permitted to continue to use as a shortcut, for the honor due to a synagogue cannot annul the public right of access to the path. Now, I'm guessing, if you've been to Israel and you've seen the restoration of some of those ancient synagogues, my guess is that some of these places were pretty open.
Yeah.
Because obviously you couldn't make a shortcut through Sinai Synagogue. Oh, come on. All right. Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, with regard to one who enters a synagogue without intending to make it into a shortcut, when he leaves, he is permitted to make it into a shortcut for himself by leaving through the exit on the other side of the building. And Rabbi Chalbo said, with regard to one who enters a synagogue to pray, he is permitted to make it into a shortcut by leaving through a different exit. And it is fitting to do so, as it is stated, and when the people of the land shall come before the Lord in the appointed seasons, he that enters by way of the north gate to bow down shall go forth by way of the south gate. So there are times when you can make a shortcut through it, but it's, in these situations, unique situations. Okay, here the Mishnah teaches also, alubo asavim lo yitlosh. You should not pull up, basically, you shouldn't clean up the grass that's growing up in a ruined synagogue, mibnei agmat nefesh. Because when you see the synagogue in ruins, and you see that the grass is growing inside it, you'll feel bad. And you'll want to either do tshuva for the destruction of the synagogue, or you'll want to rebuild it. Okay, but then the Gemara says, V'hatanya, we've got a baraita. Eino tolesh uma'achiel, aval tolesh umeiniach. You can't pick up the grass and feed it to your animals, but you can pick it up, you can trim it, I guess, and just leave it. The Gemara's response is, when we learned the prohibition against picking the grass in the Mishnah as well, we learned only that it is prohibited to pick it and feed it to one's animals, but it's permitted to leave it there. So again, regarding, you're going to destroy a ruined synagogue, And if you pick up the grass and you just kind of pull it up and you leave it there, I guess that's it still looks pretty bad. What you can't do is pick it up and feed it to your animal. Okay, then connected to that is in a cemetery. Tanu Rabbanan, Beit HaKvarot ein nohagin behen kalut rosh. You shouldn't act lightly with frivolity in a cemetery. It's a serious place. It's a somber place. You may not graze an animal on the grass growing inside it. You may not direct a water channel to pass through it. Let's just see, why is that?
So you won't flood it.
Right. Although they are once great people. However, the prohibition against directing water channel. Yeah. So this one is a little more practical. You don't want a flood in the cemetery. One may not gather grass inside it to use the grass as feed for one's animals. And if one gathered grass for that purpose, it should be burnt immediately out of respect for the dead. Oh, so now the question is, what do we do with that mipnei kavod meitim? What is that referring to? What's it go back to? To which clause does it fit? If you say to the end, it's referring to the last clause, that if one gathered grass, that it should be burnt out of respect for the dead, then one could ask, since the grass is burnt on the spot, what respect for the dead is there in this act? Yeah, I don't know why would burning grass be respectful? Rather, it's got to refer to the first part here. In a cemetery, one may not act with frivolity out of respect for the dead. That's how they're reading it. Or actually, maybe even the first two parts. All right, now we get to the details about liturgy. In the Mishnah, Rosh Chodesh Adar, Shechal Lihiyot b'Shabbat, which was this year, Korin b'Parashat Shkalim. You read Parshat Shkalim, that's the first couple of verses, first 3, 4, 5, I think it's 5 verses, in Kitisa. Chal Hiyot b'Tocha Shabbat, but if Rosh Chodesh Adar, this is right before Purim, falls during the week, Makdimim l'sha'avar, u'mafsikim l'shabbat acheret. You advance the reading to the previous Shabbat. You move it up. Shkalim, you read actually a couple days before Rosh Chodesh, and then they interrupt the reading of the 4 portions on the following Shabbat, which would be the first Shabbat of the month of Adar, and no additional portion is read on it. Wait, I want to pull up my notes here, because Joshua Kolb said, no, what did I do with it? Joshua Kolb had that in ancient times, what was the practice here? That these 4 Shabbatot in a row, I think they read in a row? I forgot what he said. Let's see if he's got it here. All right, well, I'll just follow along. I know that he shared some of his teaching here. Maybe it's in the next one. Okay.
I'm not quickly seeing one on that.
Yeah. Let's get should be on one of these. Okay. All right. Well, let's keep going. On the second Shabbat, the second of these special Shabbatot, which is always going to be the Shabbat prior to Purim, we read from Deuteronomy, the section about Amalek. Then there's a third special Shabbat, again related to Pesach, on which we read the section of the red heifer, which is about the purification process that you need because everybody's going to be entering into the sanctuary with their Pesach offerings. So you need to be in proper ritually pure situation. And on the fourth of these special Shabbatot is HaChodesh. It's right before Pesach, and it talks about the Paschal Lamb. On the fifth Shabbat, they resume the regular weekly order of readings, and no special portion is read. so Steinsaltz suggests, although the return to the regular weekly cycle is ostensibly an obvious fact, some suggest that one might have mistakenly suggested that since it is so close to Passover, portions from the Torah relating to the festival should be read instead. But I thought, yeah, here's what he says. So Kulp tells us, in order to understand this section, we need to understand some background concerning Torah reading during the Talmudic period. When a special Shabbat occurred, they would not read the regular portion of the week and then add on the special reading for that Shabbat as we do today. Rather, they would suspend the portion of the week and just read the special reading for that Shabbat. So the problem is going to come up with Shkalim because, well, we're going to see in a moment, because whether it's the Rosh Chodesh portion or the Kitisa portion, because it's always read, Shabbat Shkalim always comes right around the time that you would normally read Kitisa as the regular Torah portion. Very often it's like the week right afterwards. Or if, as we'll see in a moment, Rosh Chodesh is supposed to be the Shkalim portion, then if it's on Rosh Chodesh, you've got, again, the two readings are the same. All right, so let's go. Okay. Oh, and we should say that I think that what Rabbi Kulp means is that this is during the Mishnaic period, because by the Babylonian period, they were reading it on an annual cycle. So I don't think it was the way he was just describing. I think it's only in Israel where they were on the triennial cycle, basically 3.5 years to finish the Torah. Okay, so here's the Gemara response. Tananatam be'echad ba'adar mashmi'in al hashkalim ve'al akilaim. So in Shkalim, in Mishnah Shkalim, we learn that on the first day of Adar, they make a public announcement concerning the forthcoming collection of half shekels, Shkalim. The money is used for communal offerings. And they also mention time to uproot your diverse kinds that have grown in the fields. Because that's the time of year that you're it's the beginning of the growing season. So you want to make sure that any diverse kinds of plants are not being grown. Okay, so Bishlama al Kilai is Manzriyahi. Oh, granted, an announcement is made concerning the need to uproot diverse kinds because that's the beginning of the sowing season. But with regard to the announcement concerning the half shekels, why does it come from now? Why was it this period of time? Amar Rabbi Tavi, Amar Rabbi Yoshia. The Amar Kra Zot Olat Chodesh Bechodsho. Because it says in our Rosh Chodesh Torah reading, chapter 28, this is the burnt offering of each new moon in its renewal throughout the months of the year. The Torah says there is a month in which you must begin to renew and bring the daily and additional offering from animals purchased with new collections of half shekels that were collected in that year. Each year, a collection is made with which to finance the purchase of communal offerings for the following year. Offerings during that year may be purchased only from collections made for that year. So each year there's a fundraising drive for the coming year. The year starts in Nisan, and therefore you want to be prepared. Elsewhere it is derived from a verbal analogy that the yearly cycle begins with the month of Nisan. And since starting from and during the month of Nisan, offerings must be brought from the new collections of half shekels, it's necessary to make the collection the preceding month. Therefore, they advance the reading of Shkalim and they read it on the first of Adar so that people will be reminded to bring their half shekels to the temple in good time. Okay, so whose opinion is this? The Lo Karaban Shimon ben Gamliel. It's not like Shimon ben Gamliel because we have him on record as Amar Shtei Shabbatot, no, the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, ha'amar shtei Shabbatot, Tanya, shoalin behilchot Pesach kodem lePesach shloshim yom. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer shtei Shabbatot. So if it's not in the, because we know from Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel that 2 weeks is a sufficient period of preparation. Because we begin, they had a discussion, when should you start preparing for Passover? 30 days before Passover. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, oh, you just need 2 weeks. So they're understanding the preparation here as collecting the half shekels before the first of Nisan. So therefore, you don't need to advance that far, and you don't need to be that far in advance. The first of Adar, you could do it right 2 weeks before Nisan. You could be in the middle of Adar. Afilu tema Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel kevan de amar mar bechamisha asar bo shulchanot yoshvim b'medina. Since the master said on the 15th of Adar, that's 2 weeks before Nisan, money changing tables for collecting the half shekels are set up throughout the country, and on the 25th of Adar they are set up in the temple. Because the possibility to donate the half shekels are set up on the 15th, they advance the reading of Shkalim to inform people of that possibility and read it 2 weeks earlier. So, even if you followed Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who said, no, you don't have to, you only need a couple weeks before Nisan. Yeah, but it's like anything, you got to ask for the order 3 times. So you got to let people know well in advance of the time that the money changing tables for bringing your half shekels are up, that they're needed. So you could still hold that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was the author of that opinion. All right. Now, what is here's we get into the nitty-gritty of what we're reading on Shkalim. Rav Amar, Tzav et b'nei Yisrael v'amart alehem et korbani lachmi. That's the opening of our Rosh Chodesh Torah portion. Command the children of Israel and say to them, bring my offering, the provision of my offerings made by fire, which details, and it begins with the daily offerings, then it begins the Shabbat offerings, and then it talks about Rosh Chodesh. But the first part is the daily offerings. Shmuel said it is kitisa, that the opening, that those opening verses of kitisa talks about shekels. So now we have to understand why each one had their point of view. Bishlama lamanda amar kitisa. Okay, if you held that you should be reading the kitisa portion, because it talks about shkalim. Hainu dekare la parashat shkalim, dichtiv ba shkalim. It mentions shkalim in those opening verses. Okay, well, too bad they don't have the verses up here, but okay.
This is what everyone who is entered in the record shall pay, a half shekel by the sanctuary weight. That's verse 13.
Okay, great. In fact, oh, thank you. In fact, verse 14 and 15 also mention shekels. So you got the whole thing. The whole passage is talking about shekels there. Every which is another midrash that's used to explain that there are three half shekels that are collected. Okay. So is there anything written about half? Oh, but what about the passage from Numbers? Nothing about shekels there. The Gemara answers yes. What is the reason that they are collected in Adar? As what we just read from Rabbi Tavi, that they are, you have to use the new batch of half shekels that you're collecting for the coming year. You have to collect it then, because you only got to use the new ones, the new tax, the new collection for these upcoming sacrifices during the year. So
I can understand, if you're out of money, or out of silver, I guess, why you would need it, but it's not like shekels go bad the way grain does.
Oh,
yeah. In modern times, at least, have the idea that money is fungible also.
Right, yeah. So that's kind of interesting. So obviously, it seems like No, that the money that you collect, whatever funds you collect. No, let's go backwards. Whatever sacrifices are coming up this year from Nissan, 5782 or what, I don't know how they would count it back then, what year it would be. But what the year starts for them, the year starts in Nissan.
Yeah.
So everything that you have to collect that money for that year, and
There's
you
a
have to,
separate fund for each year.
right, exactly. Now, what we don't know from here is, I don't know, let's say you collected 10,000 shekels and you need 8,000 for
Yeah, I
the
think it goes on and says something about
must-
it, if I remember correctly, but yeah, that struck me as strange.
You must collect 300,000 shekels, right?
Yeah. Oh, right, exactly. So, okay. All right, so Grant, okay, Bishlama Lemande Amart Savet B'nai Israel. Okay, so now we're going to go the other side. All right, granted, according to the one who said it is the portion of the, you use this section from Numbers because it's talking about the offerings, korbanot hatam. Ela lamande amar kitisa korbanot mi kative. Where is it written anything about korbanot? I mean, you talk about shkalim, yeah, that's true, but where do we get the idea that it has anything to do with the korbanot of the offerings? Well, because the only things that it's referring to, that's what the argument is, the collection of half shekels for use in the construction of the sockets are the only thing written in that portion. So the response is, Kedetani Rav Yosef, shalosh trumotim. There were actually 3 collections. Shel mizbeach lemizbeach, v'shel adanim la'adanim, v'shel bedek habayit levedek habayit. The contribution of the altar is for the purchase of communal offerings to be sacrificed on the altar. The contribution of the sockets is for the constructing of the sockets. And the contribution for the temple maintenance is for some temple maintenance. So that's why each of those, here, it tells you on the side here. A half shekel, a contribution to the Lord. Everyone that passes among them that are numbered shall give a contribution. And the rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less than a half shekel. So each of those 3 statements refers to one of these uses. Bishlama lamande amar ki tisa hainu deshani hai rosh chodesh misha'ar roshei chodeshim. Okay, now wait a minute. Here we have another issue. Granted, according to the one who said that it is the portion of Kitisa, this is what is different about this new moon of Adar and other new moons when they occur on Shabbat. That is, every new moon, you're going to read the Rosh Chodesh portion. So what makes Shabbat Shkalim unique if you're reading the Rosh Chodesh portion on Rosh Chodesh Adar? So at least on this one, you've got a special reading, Kitisa. Ella lamande amart savet korbani lachmi. What is different about the portion read on Adar than any other? So then the Gemara answers, and this is what I think Rabbi Kulpa was responding to. It says here they're different. For on other new moons, when they occur in Shabbat, 6 people read from the regular weekly portion of the matter of the day. Well, maybe this is a little different from what Kulpa was saying. You read whatever the weekly Torah portion is. No. The matter of the day is the matter of the day. Okay, that's got to be the Binyan Yoma. Yeah, it's got to be the regular Shabbat Torah portion. And one reads from the new moon portion. Whereas now, wait. This is a regular Shabbat, right? The regular Shabbat, you have, according to this custom that they're talking about, whatever, I'm trying to think, what's before not Vayak, Titzaveh. So Titzaveh, let's say that's the regular weekly Torah portion. Oh, no, there's no good. I got to go. Let's say it's this week, whatever. This week it can be any new Rosh Chodesh. So this past week, let's say it was Rosh Chodesh and we read from Bechukotai. So you would read, 6 people would read from Bechukotai, and then 1 person reads from Rosh Chodesh. Whereas now, on the new moon of Adar, if it occurs on Shabbat, all 7 read from this Rosh Chodesh portion. That's what Rabbi Kulp was trying to explain. That, and I think he even said in his note something about there'd be a lot of repetitions because, it's a very short portion. So you just keep repeating a lot of the verses. Okay, so that's how the person, what's it here again? Rav, Rav was the one who was arguing it's from numbers. So Rav and those who follow Rav, that's how they would do it. They would just read that portion, the special portion for Shkalim on that day, which happens to be the same as Rosh Chodesh. Hanichel Amande Amar L'Seder Parashiot Hu Choser. Okay, that works out well according to the one who said that when the Mishnah states that on the 5th Shabbat, we resume the regular order of readings. The intention is that one resumes the regular order of Torah portions. This implies that on the previous 4 Shabbatot, the regular portion was not read, just the special portion. However, but the person who says that the Mishnah's intention is that the one who resumes the regular order of concluding readings, that is the Haftarot, and on the previous Shabbatot, one also reads from the regular portion of the matter of the day, then the original question stands. What's the different about new Rosh Chodesh Adar and any other Rosh Chodesh, right? So that's the problem. So if you're a person who says that the way that we read the Torah reading cycle is we get to these 4 Shabbatot, the entire Torah reading is that special Shabbat, Torah reading, that special Shkalim, Parah, HaChodesh, whatever. That's okay. But if you're saying that it's only the Haftarot that change, which is the way we do it, we have special Haftarot for those weeks, but that you also read from the regular portions, then how does Rosh Chodesh Adar differ from the other Shabbatot? Other Rosh Chodeshes. Shane. Okay, so here's the difference. For whereas on the other new moons, when they occur on Shabbat, 6 people read from the regular weekly portion of the matter of the day. 1 reads from the portion of the new moon, because it's Rosh Chodesh. And if Shabbat Shkalim, and now on the new moon, how am I reading this? 6 people read from the regular weekly Torah portion of the matter of the day, and 1 reads from the portion of the new moon. Now, on the new moon of Adar, if it occurs on Shabbat, I see what I'm saying. Ve'ilu ha'idna karu tlata be'inyana diyoma. However, in this case, now 3 people would read the weekly Torah portion. The arba'a and 4 people, because you got to have 7 aliyot, would read from Rosh Chodesh. You'd split it up into 4 parts. So that's even different. That's also different from what we do today. Because they're saying that you basically split it in half between Rosh Chodesh and the regular weekly Torah portion. And the Rosh Chodesh portion doubles also for Shkalim. Now we have an objection, Meitvei. Rosh Chodesh Adar, Shechal Lihiyot b'Shabbat. Okay, so the Rosh Chodesh Adar that falls on Shabbat, Korin b'Parashat Shkalim, Umaftirin b'Hoyeda HaKohen. We read, the Haftarah is from 2 Kings 12. That's the story of King Yehoshua. And not Yehoshua, King Yoash, who had this whole, he was upset with the way they were collecting the shkalim. Okay, so granted, according to the one who has said the shkalim portion is kitisa, which is what we do today, this is the reason that they read as the Haftarah, the story about Yehoiada the priest, because it's comparable in content to the Torah reading. The Damile, right? It's similar, because they talk about shkalim in that section. Ella lamande amar et korbani lachmi, but if you believe that numbers is the shkalim portion, midami, how is that connected to the Haftarah portion? It's comparable in this way, based on what Rav Tavi said, that the collections were for the annual offerings, and that's what it's all about. It's really about the Bedek Habayit, but the fixing up the temple. But again, it's also about collecting money to use for purpose of offerings and fixing up the temple. All right. Another objection. If the new moon of Adar occurs on the Shabbat on which the portion to be read for the weekly Torah portion is adjacent to the portion read as shkalim, right, whether on the Shabbat preceding or following, then they read and repeat shkalim on both Shabbatot, one time in the special portion and one time as a regular order. So that's the teaching from the Baraita. Bishlama lamande amar kitisa. That's okay if the shkalim reading is kitisa, because this is how it's possible. The portion could occur at that time in the year. Oh, I see. Dimitra me behahi zimna. It could occur. It could happen at that time, because see, and that's exactly what happens. Is that when we get to Shabbat Shkalim, it's right at the end of. It's the latter half of Exodus, so it's always going to be around, because Kitisa is near the end of Exodus. So it's always going to be around that time. So you could, as this Baraita suggests, read it 2 weeks in a row. However, Lamanda Mar Tzavet Korbani, if you say that the portion you're supposed to read is from Numbers, that's not going to be. Numbers is, you got months to go before you get to Numbers. How could you ever be in a position where you'd read Shkalim 2 weeks in a row? That portion 2 weeks in a row. So the Gemara answers, yes, it sometimes occurs that this portion is read during the beginning of Adar for the people of the West. Eretz Yisrael. Wait, no. Who completes her? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the wrong Torah portion. Yes, it sometimes occurred that this portion is read during the beginning of Adar for the people of the West. The people on the Palestinian custom of 3+ years to go through the entire cycle of Torah readings, it is possible that in one of those 3 years, or during that cycle time, you could, in one of those years, when you get to Shkalim, Parshat Shkalim, in the beginning of Adar, it could be the Book of Numbers.
So in this 3-year scheme, you're doing an entire portion in 1 week? Is that?
No, you're basically what?
So that's what the stuff in the Talmud sounds like, that they read an entire portion in 1 week. So
no, what they're doing is like you start with Genesis. It takes 3 weeks to finish what we usually would read in 1 week for part.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So they do that all at once, the
Right.
3 consecutive weeks. So that's not a current practice anywhere, is it?
No. I know of one congregation that attempted that, because there's a frustration among a lot of more traditionalists in the conservative movement, this notion of a triennial reading I mean, this is a made up thing. Nobody, when we talk about a triennial reading today, we're just reading a third of the Torah portion.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I thought.
So, but that's not what they're talking. That's not what the people in Eretz Yisrael did.
They're talking about reading a third each of 3 consecutive weeks.
Right. So they would only celebrate Simchat Torah is a more medieval observance. And I guess in the land of Israel, and I don't know exactly how they did it, but it would take them, they wouldn't celebrate the completion of the Torah reading cycle except for once every 3+ years. So they didn't have a Simchat Torah celebration. It was the Babylonians. So there was in the conservative movement, there was this big debate, because what do you say? What kind of celebration of Simchat Torah? You haven't really completed the Torah reading cycle. You just read some of the Torah. So, but you did read a little bit of each Torah portion. And then there were the more traditionalists like myself who say, no, you should read the whole thing. So, but what we call the triennial cycle today is simply expediency. It's just, it takes so long for most people to sit through it that they cut it down. So, but that's not what they're doing in the land of Israel. And so therefore they had a lot more haftarot. There were a lot more
Yeah.
So, but that's wait, where I just lost my place here. Okay. Where did we here we go. All right. So here's the end of the passage. Tanya Kvate de Shmuel, Rosh Chodesh Adar Shechal Lihiot B'Shabbat, Korin Ki Tisa, Umaftirim B'Ohayata Kohen. So there's a Baraita that supports Shmuel's reading that it's actually the Shkalim passage is Ki Tisa. And here we have the description of the few times of the year that we take out 3 Torah scrolls. Amar Rabbi Yitzhak Napacha, Rosh Chodesh Adar, Shechal Lihiot B'Shabbat, Motzi'in Shalosh Torot. You take out 3 Torah scrolls, and you read in each of them. Echad be'inyana shel yom. One of them you read the weekly Torah portion. Ve'echad be'shel Rosh Chodesh, and one is Rosh Chodesh. Ve'echad be'kitisa. Ve'amar. So those are your 3 readings. Ve'amar Rabbi Yitzhak Napacha, Rosh Chodesh Tevet Shechal Lehiyot B'Shabbat. So this is in the winter, the middle of Hanukkah. Again, you have 3 readings. If Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh Tevet, one for the main reading of the day, the weekly Torah portion, usually Miketz. One is for Rosh Chodesh, and one is for the Hanukkah. The Maftir is for Hanukkah.
So what is the special Hanukkah reading?
It's the gifts of in Numbers, the gifts of the chieftains.
Okay, thank you.
From it's coming up. The portion is coming up in a couple of weeks. It's Naso.
Right, I was going to say that's Naso.
Yeah. Utsricha the Itmar Baha Bahaka Amar Rabbi Yitzhak Aval Bahach Kirav Sphirale. Okay, let's see. It's necessary for Napach. Oh, so the question is, I think, why did we were talking about Shkalim, why does he share with us that why did he have to teach us about the two situations? So you needed to, because if it had only been stated with regard to the new moon of Tevet, one could have mistakenly thought that only with regard to that case does Rabbi Napacha say take 3 scrolls out. But with regard to Rosh Chodesh Adar, maybe he holds with Rav. Maybe he agrees with them that it's Shkalim. And 2 Torahs will therefore suffice.
So,
yeah.
I mean, it was common for congregations to own 3 Torahs, or for synagogues. It sounds like you were required to have at least 3.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because it was considered to be a real what's the word I'm looking for in English? Not an insult, but it was troubling to the congregation to sit there while you're trying to scroll through.
Right,
Yeah.
sure. No, I understand the reason. I was just thinking of
Yeah, so people would.
now a Torah is very expensive in
Yeah.
small congregations.
Yeah, that's a
You
good
have
question.
to rely on gifts to get even one.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So, no, that's a good point. Now, of course, in the ancient world, you didn't have books, so maybe this
Right.
was the communal,
yeah,
communal thing that you had. Everybody had 3 Torah scrolls, but that would be actually a very interesting question.
I mean, that was sort of an idle curiosity kind of question.
Yeah, yeah. Like, what did small communities do with, we're talking about like in the year 500, 600, 700, or even later.
Yeah.
What would you do if you only had 1 Torah scroll for the community? Do you just deal with the fact we're going to roll it, or do you read from a smaller scroll? Yeah, maybe that's a good. That is an interesting. What if you had, because we've learned that communities did have separate scrolls, humashim, literally.
Yeah.
If maybe they had to pick out.
Maybe it was a lot cheaper to get,
Yeah,
a spare machine for
right.
Kodesh.
That's a
Or
really.
a spare chumash.
No, just sort of gets, how did they actually function? Which
Yeah.
is interesting.
Yeah.
Right, because we read this, we assume because today we have 3 Torah scrolls, so we'll
Yeah.
read from the 3. But what if you lived at a time when that was really dear to you?
Yeah.
And you didn't have books either, so you couldn't say, "Well, we'll just read out of the Chumash here." But you. So what did you do? Yeah. Okay, so he says, well, based on that logic, let Rabbi Yitzchak just say the halacha with respect to the new month of Adar. You didn't have to give the Hanukkah situation. The Gemara answers, no, indeed, one was stated from the other by inference, that he was specifically teaching about the new month of Adar, and since he mentioned that, it was inferred, the same is going to be true with the new moon of the Rosh Chodesh of Tevet, which also occurs during the holiday period, where you have a special reading. Itmar Rosh Chodesh Tevet Shechal Hiyot Bechol Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Karu Tlata beRosh Chodesh ve'Echad beChanukah veRav Dimi de Min Haifa Amar Karu Tlata beChanukah ve'Echad beRosh Chodesh. So what do we do when Rosh Chodesh falls during Hanukkah and it's during the week? It's not on Shabbat. Do you take, usually on Rosh Chodesh you have 4 readers from the Rosh Chodesh portion. Do you cut it down to 3 and read 1 maftir for Hanukkah? The rest of the week on Hanukkah, when it's not Rosh Chodesh, you have 3 readers for the Hanukkah reading. Do you read 3 and then the special one for Rosh Chodesh? What do you do? So 2 different possibilities. Rav Mani said, Kavate de Rabbi Yitzchak Napacha mistabra. So we hold by Rabbi Yitzchak Napacha, who said 3 read from Rosh Chodesh and 1 reads from Hanukkah. Why? Because Rosh Chodesh comes more often than Hanukkah. Hanukkah comes once a year. Rosh Chodesh comes every month, and that's usually the explanation. Tadir v'she'ino tadir kodam. That which comes frequently is compared to a practice that comes infrequently. We take frequency takes precedence. That's why we put on the talis before we put on tefillin, because we wear a talis every day, but tefillin we only wear during weekdays. Amar Rabbi Avi, Kvate de Rav Dimi mistabra. Oh, he follows Rav Dimi. Migaram l'Ravi'i sheyavo. Why are we reading a 4th Aliyah anyway? Because during Hanukkah we only have 3 readings. We only have 3 readers. What now? You got a 4th one because it's Rosh Chodesh. So therefore, Rosh Chodesh should be the 4th one, and we should read from the bulk of the readings should be the Hanukkah readings. Okay. My have Allah. So what was the solution? What did they do? Rav Yosef said, Ein mashkichin berosh chodesh. We don't concern ourselves with making the portion for the new moon the primary reading. Rather, 3 people read from the portion of Hanukkah, and the 4th reads from the new moon. That's Rav Yosef. Rabbah said, we do not concern ourselves with making the portion for Hanukkah the primary reading. Rather, 3 people read from the portion of the new moon. and only the fourth person reads from Hanukkah. And the Gemara concludes V'hilchata, which is not usual, but here they tell you that the halacha is, right? Because we've seen a lot of times with the Talmud, they just kind of leave it up in the air. Here they say, this is a halacha. Ein mashkichin b'Chanukah. We do not concern ourselves with making the portion, the Hanukkah primary. It is the new moon, which is primary. All right, a little bit more. Itmar chalihiyot b'va'ata titzaveh amar Rabbi Yitzchak Napacha. Karu shita miviata titzaveh ad kitisa v'chad mikitisa ad va'asita. Amoraic dispute. We're back to Shkalim. If the Shabbat on which the portion of Shkalim, what time? Oh boy, we're going a little late today. Okay. If the Shabbat on which the portion of Shkalim is to be read occurs on the Shabbat in which the regular Torah portion, that's what we just said, or I said earlier, right? It's the week right before Kitisa. What do? 6 people read from the portion Atatitzaveh until you get to the end, and then you kind of stick on Kitisa at the end. And one reads from the portion of Kitisa, but up until, but not including the very end of that section. Abaye said, so Abaye says, since Shkalim is read from the portion in the Torah immediately following the regular weekly Torah reading, people will mistakenly say that they merely extended the regular reading and then halted there. And they'll not realize that the last reading was actually the case for the sake of Shkalim. So let's pause here, since I didn't send the note out for the 30 anyway, and I'll send it out again. But here's this is the problem. You've got Kitisa is the very next verses after the end of Titzaveh. What do you do if Bat Shkalim is the week of Kitisa of Titzaveh? Do you continue going and add a little bit, or do you pause at and make that, and part of the Kitisa is then part of the weekly Torah reading, or do you pause, start over again with a second Torah? Which one of those two? Well, what's the solution? So we'll get to that. We'll start that next week. All right. So, and I will send out the note that actually we've got 2 more sessions.
Okay.
Next Tuesday, we will do it because of Shavuot. We'll do it in the evening again, and then we'll finish up on the 19th. Or, not the
12th.
Yeah. Very good. All right. Then we'll take a break for the summer.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
I hope you recover completely soon, and Lizzie does.
Yeah. Thank you very much. All right. Take care.
Best wishes to Lizzie.
Yeah.
Take care.